Good evening, everyone. Hopefully, you're having a wonderful day so far. I've got a good one for you today. So, last time we did a compilation of Justin Trudeau's year-end interviews, and I thought it would be fun to contrast that to the way better Prime Minister Stephen Harper's year-end interview in 2013. So, with no further ado, let's get into it.
Well, Prime Minister, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Now, in the past year, you've faced some political headwinds, and it's led to some speculation about whether you're going to run in the next election. So my first question is a very simple one. Are you going to run in 2015?
Yes, it's kind of surreal. I tell people being in this job, one day I open the paper and see that I'm planning to resign. The next day I open the paper and see that I'm calling a snap election ahead of the legislated date. We have an election scheduled in 2015, and I plan to lead the party in that. But look, I think, Jacques, the other important thing to say is I'm not campaigning now. This is 2013, not 2015, and we have a lot to do. We're still in a significantly challenged global economy, and that's where we're focused, and that's what we'll be focusing on for at least another year.
It seems to me that one of the challenges you face as you move towards the next election is what I would call this political millstone around your neck about this whole Senate scandal, the actions by your office during this whole Senate mess. Now, you've been very clear that you knew nothing at all about Nigel Wright's deal with Mike Duffy, but we've learned that there was an earlier plan for the Conservative Party to reimburse him. So I just want to know, were you aware at all about that plan at the time?
No, as you know, as I've said repeatedly, I told Mr. Duffy, this came up in a caucus meeting, and I was very clear he should repay his own inappropriately claimed expenses. And that was my view all along. And as you know, that's what Mr. Duffy claimed publicly he had done. That turned out not to be true, which is the reason, one of the reasons he's been so severely sanctioned by the Senate.
There's been a lot of focus on...
Wow, look at that. Okay, so I quickly looked this up, and this is from Wikipedia. So in 2013, in Stephen Harper's, in the Senate, Senators Patrick Brazeau, Mike Duffy, Mac Harb, and Pamela Wallin claimed travel and living allowance expenses from the Senate for which they were not eligible. Deloitte LLP was retained to provide the Senate with an independent examination of the expense claims. Duffy, Harb, and Wallin repaid ineligible amounts. Harb retired a few months into the scandal, and in November 2013, Duffy and Wallin were suspended from the Senate without pay. Duffy and Harb were criminally charged. Now in 2016, Duffy was acquitted of all charges. But contrast that to the Justin Trudeau government, where we've had scandals and scandals and scandals, where they've been just siphoning off money to all their friends. We're talking like all the way back to the SNC Lavalin scandal to right now the Green Slush Fund scandal. And not to mention the most recent Governor General when she flew to, I think it was Greece or something, and she spent a couple million, and she's still in as Governor General. Contrast to that to Stephen Harper's Senate, where they found this out, and they had to pay everything back. And afterwards, 2 years later, they were criminally charged, and they stepped down. That's what a real leader does. And we thought Trudeau would be better than this guy.
On the meeting February 22nd between yourself and Mr. Wright. And I'm just wondering, what did you discuss? What did he tell you? And I think more importantly, from your point of view, what did he not tell you?
Well, look, at all times, what I was told is that Mr. Duffy was going to repay his expenses, as I thought he should. And I think all the facts are very clear on that. Look, obviously, I wasn't told the full story. And, Jacques, to be frank, I've had a range of emotions about that. Anger, betrayal, disrespect, you name it, disappointment. But in the end, when you have these kinds of situations, as a leader, you have to take responsibility, and there are two things we've done. One is to obviously make sure those who undertook these actions have been held accountable, and I think they have been, and they're subject, as you know, to further investigation. And the other is to, obviously look at our processes and try and figure out how we could make sure something like that never happens again, because clearly the leader has to be fully informed and has to give his consent to any kind of major decision like that.
So how do you do that? How do you ensure that doesn't happen again?
Well, I won't get into the details, but obviously it's a matter of how decisions are made, how information is transmitted, who's responsible for what. So we've taken a pretty serious look at that, and I think we have some fixes. But look, this is not something that would happen under any normal circumstance. I mean, that's part of the issue with this entire thing. It is so unusual for anyone to take money out of his own personal accounts and give it to someone whose expenses he knows are not appropriate. It's just such a bizarre story that one would hope it would not be repeated. But I say we are looking seriously at how we would try and avoid anything like that.
You've been very clear that you thought what Nigel Wright did in terms of the secret deal with Mike Duffy was wrong. Mm-hmm. I'm interested about your judgment and some of the other actions taken by your office. For example, the attempts to initiate contact with Deloitte to try to influence that independent audit. From a moral perspective, using your own moral compass, was that proper?
Well, look, I'm not going to get into dissecting the ins and outs of all this. Clearly, a lot of things. Clearly, Jacques, I mean, what's so troubling about Mr. Wright's decision is the decision was a decision he made without authority, and he made in secret, and then directed a lot of people to do other things based on a misunderstanding or misinformation about what the truth of the situation was. And clearly the ethical issues there are enormous, which is why as soon as I heard about it, I insisted Mr. Wright go immediately to the Ethics Commissioner, and why we've provided all the authorities with relevant information. But I think ultimately it's Mr. Duffy who took the money and Mr. Wright who made the payment that are responsible.
So right when he found out, he notified the authorities and gave them all, and I'm saying, underlining, all of the relevant information that they needed. Unlike the Trudeau government, which blacks out all of the relevant information that they need to investigate the Green Slush Fund scandal, which, if you haven't been watching, is the SDTC scandal.
Responsible for these series of actions.
When you found out exactly what was going on in your office, did you find yourself wondering why members of your staff thought this was acceptable behavior?
Absolutely. And the truth of the matter is, Mr. Wright himself says that his actions were wrong. He came to that conclusion extremely quickly. He's been very clear about that. He's been very forthcoming with authorities on any information, all information proactively. So, you ask yourself, how could a guy who's so smart and generally so respectful of the rules, so high performing, how could he do something that's so obviously wrong and not realize it before he did it? I don't know the answer to that, but that sometimes good people do bad things, and more importantly, it just underscores why there needs to be proper process and why people need to be involved in proper decision making and not go off and make decisions on their own.
There's been a long-standing debate in this country about Senate reform and/or abolition.
And I'm not saying this is okay, whatever, but a big thing is even with smart and good people, you never know what people will do when put in a certain situation. So possibly Stephen Harper doesn't know the situation that I guess Duffy was in. He had a moment of weakness where maybe he didn't think he'd get caught or something, right? And his internal voice didn't kick in, and then something happened. And then when he kicked in, he felt guilty, right? You don't know what good people will do at certain times until they're confronted by it. But it's good that Duffy came forward right away. As it says, he stepped down right away and paid everything back.
The events of the past year involving the Senate, if there's a continuum between reform and abolition, Have your own thoughts about abolition? Have you moved at all on that continuum from reform to abolition?
Well, I've always said, I told this to the Senate in 2006, I believe the Senate should be reformed, and if it can't be reformed, it should be abolished. I continue to advocate some practical reforms that I think we can do federally, shortening the terms, getting some of these people elected, as some of the Alberta ones are now. Unfortunately, as you know, these reforms have been tied up by court challenges, so we'll see what the court ultimately says about this. But what I would say about this, Jacques, I think it's important, is there is a silver lining here, which is that for the first time in 150 years, the Senate's actually now transparent on its expenses. When people break the rules, we know that, and people are actually held accountable. And this has not happened before. It's been a very painful process, but this is actually a fairly meaningful reform. And I hope we'll see more like it.
But is it still an institution worth saving?
The institution clearly has to change dramatically to be an institution that can be justified in the modern age. I mean, my view is you cannot justify, no matter how many, there are lots of good senators, no matter how many good people are in the Senate, you cannot justify an unelected legislature in the 21st century.
Big promise that you've been making for the last few years is that you want to balance the federal books by 2015.
Right.
And it certainly looks like you're on track to do that. It seems to me that gives you some fiscal maneuverability to start looking at opportunities, to start dreaming a little bit. So I'm just wondering, once you've balanced those books, what do you intend to do with that fiscal freedom?
Well, first of all, let me just...
Oh, dang. What we missed here, man. And I'm guilty of this too, because I was going to vote Justin Trudeau at 2015 because I was a stupid college kid. What we missed out on, let's look.
Maybe talk about the preamble. We're happy with the progress we're making. It does appear that we'll not only balance our books on time, but well ahead of other countries. We have a pretty low debt level as well, so we want to secure the country's fiscal advantage going into the future. This is one of the things, one of the many things, one of the best things that marks us out from almost all the other developed countries, as we actually have our fiscal house in order. So yeah, absolutely, we want to get that done, barring another shock to the global economy, which, as you know, is far from certain. We're still in uncertain times. We'll get that done. We've already set a couple things. We've already set some debt reduction targets. We want to make sure our debt levels continue to come down over the next few years. They're not at any kind of crisis now, but it's just another part of securing a long-run fiscal advantage. We said in the last election campaign we have some very specific tax reduction measures we'd like to bring in for Canadian families. We do think that hardworking middle-class Canadian families often have a disproportionate share of the tax burden. That's something we want to address, and we'll also continue to make investments, as we are now, in things that we believe will increase the productive capacity of the Canadian economy over time. We're doing things in our north. We're going to complete the highway system to the Arctic coast. These are things that define our country. We're playing a big role in the international scene on child and maternal health. Here's something where Canada is leading some very concrete investments that are making a real difference, saving the lives of mothers and children who otherwise would not live. So look, there'll be, well, I don't know about this shock. No matter how big eventually we'll get a surplus, and no matter how big it is, the demands will be 10 times as big as the surplus. But we'll pick our spots carefully, as I say, to make sure we keep our debt going down, make sure taxpayers get their share, and also make sure that we contribute to, quote, some dreams and some development, but in ways that provide real concrete payback.
I like how he put that, how Stephen Harper said, no matter how much of a surplus that we have, there will always be more of a need than a surplus. So they would have picked what they could do to keep the debt low. So they wouldn't give us everything like the NDP always promise on doing. They'd pick and choose what is the most important to keep our finances in check. And that's what a real leader does. And especially I liked when he said back before this that as a leader, you have to take responsibility for your employees' actions. Now, cross this over to Justin Trudeau, and he's been hiding the last, month? He didn't even come out with a year-end interview. And do you think that's taking responsibility? No, that's not. I do also like how Stephen Harper also mentioned that the middle class here in Canada take a disproportionate amount of tax burden than anyone else. So that is an awesome thing to highlight because I think we forget about that.
A big focus on trade.
Yeah.
You've signed, you were in Brussels this fall signing a EU trade deal.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, you now sets the stage to pursue even more. There's the Trans-Pacific Partnership, there's bilateral deals we're looking at with Japan, India, South Korea. How much momentum do you have in terms of pursuing those negotiations by having signed the EU trade deal? How do you capitalize on that? And what kinds of things stand in the way of further trade deals?
Well, we got great momentum. Look, let me give you the whole story here, which is when we came to office in 2006, Canada, in spite of having one of the most open economies in the developed world, had trade agreements with only 5 countries. Dead last. So we've gone from trade agreements with 5 countries to trade agreements now with 42 countries. And those 42 countries represent half of global GDP, over half of global GDP. So we are now well anchored in the global trading system. On top of that, unlike in 2006, because we've been doing so much of this stuff, we've actually now developed significant trade negotiation resources. When we came to office, we had almost none. It isn't just that we've signed some deals, makes it easier to sign other deals. Also makes it easier not to sign other deals. It makes it easier to say no if something really isn't in your interest, or you can take a tougher position because you have other fallback options in the trade community.
Now, Prime Minister, we've spoken about the opportunities you see for this country. I'm also
Yeah, and we hear this from Justin Trudeau all the time, and Chrysler Freeland was, our country has the most trade deals with all of the other countries, yada, yada, yada. We just saw right here, this stemmed from the Conservatives. Like, the Conservatives got most of these trade deals, and the Liberals just branched off of it.
Also interested where you see the challenges. What are the things that worry you the most these days?
Well, look, I think the government's 3 overriding objectives when you talk about Canada in the world are our prosperity, our security, and our values, our democracy. These are all things that face very significant challenges today and going forward. Obviously, we've talked a bit about the economy, but we continue to be in a global economy, particularly among our traditional trading partners, that is very challenged, that is very unpredictable. And we face a couple of significant challenges or threats to us. One is the demographic changes. We're seeing the aging of the population, the shrinking of the workforce. We already see significant skills shortages, as you know, in parts of our economy. That's a very big problem. And of course, we face new competitors. The Chinas, the Asias, Koreas. So I've talked about some of those things on the security front. I mean, I don't have to tell you that we're in a world where threats of terrorism, the rise of countries that are not necessarily friendly to our values, these are very real concerns. On these things, we have to work with our allies and in cases more broadly with the international community.
You spoke about demographics. That's a concern. There's a lot of talk about pensions these days. I believe the figure is 12 million working Canadians don't have a company pension plan at all.
Right.
Your finance minister has said that at the moment he's not in favor of expanding the Canada Pension Plan, but that doesn't take away the fact that the problem exists. So I'm wondering what can you do to try to resolve this problem? And secondly, do we have to have a wider discussion, societal discussion about, I guess, first principles of retirement, start taking a look at things like retirement age, that as the average lifespan increases, is 65 really the age at which people should be retiring?
We're gradually raising over the next 15 years or so, we're going to be raising the age of eligibility for old age security from 65 to 67. partly because of demographics and partly because this is what we're seeing all over the world. But look, I think it's important to put all this in perspective. It is true that many Canadians don't have an employer pension plan. However, of course, we all participate in a series of government initiatives. The Canada Pension Plan, which is a government federal provincial run pension plan, as well as payments to senior citizens, old age security, the guaranteed income supplement. We also have the government subsidizes, heavily tax subsidizes individuals to save for their own retirement through registered retirement savings plans, through what was something we brought in, the tax-free savings accounts. So we provide a lot of incentive for people to save for themselves. We also have, under Minister Flaherty, we've also brought in with the province something we call the pooled registered pension plan, PRPP, which will allow for the possibility of a lot of small businesses to adopt pension plans in the future. So we are trying to fill the gaps, and we have brought in something called the Financial Literacy Leader, which is to try and better educate Canadians on the opportunities for saving and investment that are out there for them. But I don't think we should exaggerate. First of all, Canadians
So I didn't know that the Stephen Harper government brought in something that could help Canadians kind of understand how to save for retirement. So that's pretty cool. I'll try to find it, and hopefully hopefully we still have, as Canadians, that course that the government gives out, because that's a problem that we all sort of have nowadays, and let's just say it's not particularly our fault at this moment, but hopefully that has something we could all use. So if I can find that page on the government website, I'll post a link to it down below. So if you want to get some information about savings, I'll have it down there, or saving for retirement. It's awesome that Stephen Harper government brought in the tax-free savings account, because I got to say, I do not like RRSPs whatsoever.
Basic needs are largely served by government support programs when they are senior citizens, and we have virtually the lowest rate of seniors poverty in the world. Not to say we couldn't do some more, but that's where we're at. And we have lots of Canadians, either through their employer or on their own, who are in fact saving for their retirement and in very good financial shape for their retirement. The more worrisome group is a group of people who have reasonably affluent lifestyles but just don't save. They have the opportunity to do so. So I don't think the challenge is to raise CPP taxes on everybody. It's to try and figure out how to get the people who actually need to save to do the saving they need to do.
But we haven't been very successful so far in convincing them to do that.
Well, most Canadians do save. I mean, the fact is the vast majority of Canadians have been saving and will have a decent, will be able to retire at a normal age and maintain a standard of living similar to what they're having is working. But there is a significant proportion that isn't. But I think we've got to find a solution that addresses that problem, and not one that imposes a whole bunch of taxes on business and on workers that businesses and workers don't think they should be paying.
The energy sector, it's a key.
Wow. What a stark difference from the government we have now. Oh, we don't think it's a good idea to impose taxes on other people that they shouldn't be paying, just because other people aren't responsible with their money. What a stark difference.
Driver of our economy, and so far your government has not introduced regulations to try to limit greenhouse gas emissions from that sector. And I'm just wondering, the longer you don't take action, do you start to risk harming that, what I would call that social license that I think we're going to increasingly need to sell oil from the oil sands in the international markets?
Well, look, I think there's more to it than the emissions issue. When you're talking about social license, you're also talking about things like the safe transport through pipelines and tankers and everything else. And of course, the government has made very clear, we've commissioned a whole bunch of studies and reports to make sure we're doing everything we absolutely need to do to make all aspects of the energy system safe. In the case of emissions, the government in fact, this is the first time, it's important to say, this is the first time in Canadian history a Canadian government has actually had some success in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And we've done it by bringing in regulations and restricting, bringing in emission standards in certain sectors. That's what we have been doing. We've done it in transportation. We have done it in energy in the case of coal-fired electricity. The leading cause of greenhouse gas emissions around the world, we're going to have the lowest in that in Canada, in the world. The oil and gas sector we've not yet done. As you know, this is an integrated sector continentally. And our government is certainly prepared to work with the United States on a regulatory regime that will bring our emissions down. But I think this would be best done if we could do this in concert with our major trading partner, given, as I say, it is a seamless industry in North America. So that's what I'm hoping we'll be able to do over the next couple of years.
I'd also like to talk about political challenges. And one of the things that happens in politics is something I call political.
Now, unfortunately, they didn't have enough time to do that, because that would have been way better to figure this whole oil and gas emissions thing out continentally than just a Canadian-wide thing, because emissions and global warming is a global thing. It's not just, Canada, who has the lowest emissions, lowering them more doesn't really help the globe, right? So this would have helped way more than what Justin Trudeau is doing. And because ever since we've put in the carbon tax, our emissions haven't gone down. Well, except for over the Great Cold and last year, which was probably one of a really, really bad economic year, let's just say. So
Political fatigue. And I think it's a two-headed monster. On the one hand, political parties over time, they lose steam, they get a bit tired, they run out of ideas, and I think voters at some point sort of get tired of the same faces in government. So I'm wondering, how do you combat that fatigue, especially since you're telling Canadians you'd like to be their prime minister for at least the next 6 years?
Well, first of all, on the first question on fatigue, look, I can tell you this, Jacques, and I think any objective view of it or analysis would show this. This government has passed more legislation, announced more initiatives, and is doing more stuff now than any year since we've been in government. We had our most productive year in 2013. And frankly, having a majority has made a tremendous difference. Not that I'm saying we didn't do important things in minority, but the ability to look ahead and the ability to plan initiatives that will roll out over many years. Look, in terms of we call it the boredom factor. At some point, people want to make change for the sake of change. Look, we'll address that when the time comes. Look, I'm the leader. I lead the only party in the House of Commons, the only party in the country that has a significant, capable team that can actually govern, that has well thought out economic policies the public supports. And so, when the time comes, we'll make that case. But right now, I've been trying to focus on government to the extent I can. As much as I enjoy politics, I've kind of tended to leave that for the opposition the last couple of years, and I'll worry about them when the time comes.
And my final question is, politics is a game of highs and lows. And I'm just wondering, how do you as a leader, how do you keep going when times are tough?
First of all, let me just put that in perspective. And I'm not saying there haven't been some tough days and some tough times, but I tell people I have the best job in the best country in the world. I am one of 22 people in 150 years in the history of this country has had the opportunity to have this position, to direct the affairs of our government, to travel around the country, see every part of it, meet our people, to go around the world and represent our country, and then really get through that a really privileged understanding of what a special country this is. And I can tell you this, I've had some crummy days, but those crummy days compared to what? Compared to being leader of the opposition or something else, they're still great days. But what what sustains you when you're down? I guess for me, it's probably three things. First of all, my kind of drive and determination and the clear sense I have of what I'm doing. Secondly, my family. I'm two great kids, but I'm very fortunate to have a wife who, not only loves me as one hopes a wife would, but who puts so few demands on me and takes so much off of my shoulders. And then I have my faith, and ultimately my belief that there are higher powers and higher purposes, and one should never lose sight of those.
Well, Prime Minister, once again, I'd like to thank you for spending this time with us.
Wow, and that's a stark difference. Then you don't hear that from Justin Trudeau. I've never heard Justin Trudeau say that he loves this country because of like the different demographics of it and what he's learned along the way, or what he's learned from the people he's met up with from different parts of Canada. I've never heard that from him. I've always heard that either when he was starting out that Quebec was the best province out of them all. I've heard that diversity is our strength and all the other political points, but I've never heard him say that the best thing about being prime minister is when you travel to one side of the country, you meet and get to understand the Canadians from like the eastern part of the country, and then when you travel to the western part of the country, you get to meet a whole different type of Canadians with different views on different things, which I think we forget how big Canada actually is. It's the size of the European Union. So if we think of the demographics that way, of course Canadians in the Maritimes would have a different view on things than people in Alberta or like people in BC, but yet have like so many similarities as well. So, and like Stephen Harper said, like as prime minister, you get to see that, and that's one of the perks of being prime minister. And yeah, I've never heard those similar words come out of Trudeau's mouth. Anywho, that seems to be the last portion of Stephen Harper's year-end interview in 2013. Now, I've been having a lot of fun actually going through all of these old interviews from previous prime ministers, or Justin Trudeau's old ones from like back when he started. So I think if everybody would like, and if you guys like these, I'll start doing one of these maybe once a month or something like that, and we could just go as far back as YouTube will allow. So let me know if you like this down below, and other than that, if you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you want to support the channel, I mean, there's a buy me a coffee link down below. Everything's appreciated and goes back to the channel. So other than that, have a great day.